Hi everybody, it's Andy Phillips here from ProgAxia and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to do a ranking video of Gentle Giant studio albums. There have been 11 studio albums and I've gone and listened to all of them all again, which has been a great pleasure. I've been a fan of Gentle Giant since the mid to late 70s and they have become one of my favourite progressive rock bands. So we're going to go through the ranking from 11 to 1, so from the worst to the best. And so the first one up is number 11. My number 11 is Giant for a Day, which came out in 1978. It was the 10th studio album, and by this time they'd gone into a bit of a funk. They needed to be more commercial. They felt they needed to be more commercial and to bring out more commercial records. The problem, I think, with these first 3 or 4 that I'm going to be talking about, they all fall into that same trap. Trying to be commercial, not quite making it. The idea was really to get a much bigger audience, a different type of audience, just get a lot more eyeballs on the band, and it didn't really work. The problem here is that they didn't pick up that audience. They didn't pick up that brand new audience. They might have picked up some, but they didn't pick the audience up at the level they really wanted. And the problem is they alienated a lot of the original fans. So the fan base just dissipated, and consequently it didn't really work. This came, as I say, this came out in 1978. I think most Gentle Giant fans would put this as the worst of Gentle Giant albums. I don't see many people who are Gentle Giant fans actually thinking this is anything apart from the worst album that they produced. But this, knowing that it's a commercial album, it's to a different audience, created for a different purpose, there's some good tracks on here. There's some okay tracks on here. Words from the Wise is pretty good. Giant for a Day is not a bad track. So there's a couple of good ones, but they're rock songs. They're rock albums. And so consequently, that's got to go at number 10. Sorry, at number 11. At number 10, I have Civilian, which came out in 1980. It came out a couple of years after Giant for a Day. And again, it's a rock album. And going back on it, and I say, when you go back and listen to some of these things, if you disassociate, let's say, these albums from the core of Gentle Giant, the progressive rock brilliance of Gentle Giant, if you disassociate that and just listen to the album, Civilian is not a bad rock album. You've got Convenience, All Through the Night, Shadows on the Street, which starts with a nice little piano bit. It's quite a softer track. And again, it sounds quite Gentle Giant, but it never goes anywhere. And I think this is the problem with a lot of this stuff. It never gets creative. It sounds really nice, and where you expect them to take it somewhere else and be incredibly creative, it just doesn't go there. So that's what sort of frustrates me with a lot of this stuff. But they got number 1, which is again another straight rock track, Underground, which has got a nice sort of nice bass from Ray, but it's just not that great. So again, suffers from the same thing. Civilian at number 10, but on the whole, it's actually a pretty good album, a rock album, but it's a pretty good album. Number 9, I've got Interview, which came out in 1976. It was their 8th album, our 8th studio album. And a lot of people sort of say about Interview that it just doesn't really quite cut it for some reason. I mean, this album came out in 76, Freehand was out in 75. You'd expect this to be a much better album than it is. But it sort of leaves me cold. It doesn't move me. And I've listened to it again and again and again, sort of expecting to get the vibe all of a sudden. I've never had it. I've listened to this countless times and it doesn't really move me for some reason. So for me, it's not as good an album as the other albums we've got in this. Some of the songs are okay. I mean, Interview's okay. Give It Back, it's not bad, but it's a bit of a pseudo reggae thing. It sounded a little bit like 10cc. I think they were trying to be a little bit like a 10cc type band. And that's why I think they put something like Give It Back. But Another Show's not bad. Empty City's a lovely track. But on the whole, doesn't move me. So that goes in at number 9. At number 8, we have Missing Piece. This came out in 77. And again, this suffers the same sort of thing. It's really trying to aim at a more commercial audience, try and get a different type of audience for their music, and it never worked, really. The difference is with Missing Piece to Interview is that Missing Piece has a couple of tracks on it that are stunning. And if you don't know Missing Piece, or it's just one of those albums that has passed you by, if you're a Gentle Giant fan, just go and have a listen to a couple of the tracks that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is Old As You're Young, which is classic Gentle Giant. There's no other way of saying it. It's just classic, brilliant Gentle Giant. And Memories of Old Days, which is right up there with the tracks that I love from Gentle Giant. In fact, it's probably one of the best tracks they've ever produced from an acoustic point of view. It's absolutely beautiful. So big kudos to them for doing that. Old As You're Young and Memories of Old Days on this album, because they are two really stunning tracks. The rest of them on there, I'll just read some of these out. 2 Weeks in Spain, which it's okay. I'm Turning Around is a beautiful track. Bet You Thought I Couldn't Do It sounds like just a pub rock band. But you got these other ones, and these tracks I think are really for the American market. You got Who Do You Think You Are and Mountain Time. Now Mountain Time sounds like Bob Seger or something. It's very bizarre that Gentle Giant are doing these sort of tracks. That's why this album is number 8 in the listing, in the ranking, purely because there's some tracks on here. They're just out and out rock tracks. Never really liked them, but as I say, Old As You're Young and Memories of Old Days are just brilliant tracks. So Missing Piece, or The Missing Piece, is in at number 8. At number 7, we have the debut album from Gentle Giant, called Gentle Giant. So 1970, Phil is in the band. So you got Derek, Ray and Phil, the three brothers. And this is a really, really good album, even though it's the debut album and it's almost not quite formed yet. You know, they haven't really got their teeth around exactly what the Gentle Giant sound is going to be, but it sounds really good. There's some great tracks on here. Giant's a great track. Alucard is a great track, and they've also got Funny Ways. And Funny Ways is one of those tracks that has been on live albums for years, or they played it live for years. It's sort of stuck with them all the way through their career. And Nothing at All is a great favourite of mine. It's just a beautiful, beautiful track. And the bizarre thing is this acoustic guitar track, which is absolutely incredibly beautiful, and then they have a drum solo in the middle of it. That's fine. I don't mind that. But yeah, absolutely fantastic track. And this is when they sort of come out, the Simon Dupre and the Big Sound. They stopped doing that, and then this was their first one. So 68, 67, 68, Simon Dupre and the Big Sound. And have you ever heard of a band which sounds so 1960 psychedelic, or psychedelia? Simon Dupre and the Big Sound.
Oh, behave. Yeah.
It's just a brilliant name. It's just a brilliant name. So a really good album to start the career of Gentle Giant. At number 6, I've got Acquiring a Taste. And this was a awesome album. When I first got hold of this was an incredible album. Absolutely loved it. And it's vastly different. It's a big departure from the opener, their debut album. This is their sophomore album, and it is an incredible, incredible album. So, and if you look at some of the tracks we've got on here, we have Pentacles Nativity, Edge of Twilight, which is a lovely, lovely track. The House, the Street, The Room, Acquiring a Taste, of course, Wreck, The Moon is Down, which again is a big favourite of mine. Just all the tracks on this album are really good. Not quite formulated, not quite the Gentle Giant that we've come to know and love, but it really set the stage more than the debut album. It sort of said, this is where we're going. It had music on it that was challenging, and strange and different. And I don't think there was any other bands out there who were doing anything like that whatsoever. If you think of the sort of bands that were around at the time, Genesis and Emerson, Lake and Palmer had started. They had their debut album the year before. A lot of different bands going in different directions. But Gentle Giant sounded like none of them. They were completely unique in their approach. So I think, acquiring a taste really sort of set the precedent for what they were going to do later on. So that's why it's at number 6. At number 5, I got In a Glass House. I know for a lot of Gentle Giant fans this will be higher. But for me, I love this album. I really do love this album. But the top 4 for me can't be moved. And so this has got to go in at number 5. This one was obviously the first record without Phil. So I think they really sort of pushed hard to just create a sound that was slightly different but really, really worked, and it's absolutely fantastic. Obviously got John Weathers on drums nowadays, but this album has opened my eyes a lot to what is possible on progressive rock albums. I mean, just look at the track listing on this. The Runaway, an Inmate's Lullaby, which is haunting, beautiful and disturbing at the same time. It's a very, very strange song. But Experience is on here as well. And In a Glass House, which is it's a classic Gentle Giant track. So all in all, this album, In a Glass House, came out in 1973. Absolutely fantastic, and the first one without Phil, which sort of you can tell. However, I think they accomplished a minor miracle with this album. So In a Glass House is in at number 5. This top 4 has been incredibly difficult to do because trying to put a cigarette paper between these 4 albums is almost impossible, and I had to listen to these 4 more than anything else. But at number 4, I hate to say this, but I put this album, which is Three Friends. I love this album so much. It's such a beautiful album, and a fantastic artwork as well. I think in the States they had a different artwork, but I think it was the original. I think it might have been the original album cover of the Gentle Giant, the 1970s Gentle Giant album cover. I think that's the one they put out in the States for this. I could be wrong. But I just love the artwork on this. I think this is absolutely beautiful as an album cover. But I mean, it was their first concept album as well. It was an album which they decided to put some sort of theme behind it and make it a concept album about 3 friends. And I guess if you think about it, it could be the 3 brothers and how they may be moving apart a little bit. But the concept is really about 3 friends who grew up together in their school days, when they start work, and they start moving apart both in space, in where they lived and what they did and how they worked and things like that. But I think the idea is that they're moving apart ideologically as well. So it's incredible concept, and the tracks on this are just wonderful. Prologue, School Days, which sort of sounds joyful and innocent at the beginning, and then just moves into a very, very dark area. Working All Day, Peel the Paint, Three Friends. It just track after track is just total genius, total Gentle Giant, and just a beautiful album, fantastic album. So that was number 4. At number 3, I have this beautiful album, this fantastic, beautiful album, which is Power and the Glory. I can't fault this album in the slightest. It is just absolutely amazing. My one's falling apart a little bit because I've had it so long. But the tracks on this, Proclamation, I don't think you can get a better track than Proclamation. However, I do say that every time I listen to a different album, that it's probably this is like the best. But it's genius from start to finish. Proclamation, so sincere. They used those tracks, they played those in live gigs for years. But you've also got Aspirations, Playing the Game, and then you've got Cogs in Cogs and No God's a Man, and then Facing, then Valedictory. Every single track just trots one after the other. Absolutely brilliant. And, contentiously, is it the best album? 1974 it came out. It was their 6th studio album and a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. And this is what I'm saying. This is, if they didn't do anything else, this would still be a masterpiece, a 100% stone cold masterpiece. So that was number 3. Number 2, I've got Octopus. Now, this was very difficult because this could have been number 1, maybe should have been number 1. Very, very difficult. But I listened to this and the number 1 again and again and again. And Octopus, again, there's some fantastic tracks. I mean, we talked about, maybe the best track could be Proclamation of Gentle Giant. And then you listen to this and you got the Advent of Penager, which then when you listen to that, you go, this is the best. This is the best Gentle Giant track I've ever heard. But then you go into track Raconteur Troubadour, A Cry for Everyone. In the middle section of Cry for Everyone, the centre section of that is, in my book, pure genius. I don't think there's anything better. But then you go through the tracks. And again, just listen to this. The Advent of Penager, Raconteur Troubadour, A Cry for Everyone, Knots, The Boys in the Band, which is just an amazing, amazing track. Dog's Life, Think for Me with Kindness and River. Again, every single track of that is absolutely amazing. Came out in 1972. And again, I think this one had a different US cover. I don't know. This is the one with it had an octopus on it in a jar, which looked a bit like this. I think this is a fantastic album. Again, it's the three brothers all together on this, Derek, Ray and Phil. And just the Kerry Minier's keyboards on this just blow you away, just the same as Gary Green's guitar. Fantastic album and well deserving to be number 2. Could easily have been number 1. But my number 1 album, if you haven't guessed so far, is this. And this is my stone cold masterpiece from Gentle Giant. There is not a duff track on this. And again, if we go through this, we've got Just the Same, On Reflection, Freehand, Time to Kill, His Last Voyage, Taliban, and Mobile. This was the first album that was on the Chrysalis record label. And, this came out in 75, self-produced album. The confidence shines through on this album more than any other. I think every single track is perfectly orchestrated and perfectly crafted and perfectly constructed. The vocals on Reflection alone should have an award, as far as I'm concerned. But every single transition in not just the album, the transition between tracks on the album, but the transition within the music, every single transition is there for a reason, to build each track into these little mini masterpieces. It is just an astonishing album, and I think deserves to be the number 1. It could have been this album. It could have been Octopus, but I chose in the end to put Freehand as my number 1 album in this ranking. So let's just quickly go through these. I've got these all written down. Number 11 was Giant for a Day, which came out in 1978. Number 10, Civilian, came out in 1980. Interview was number 9, which came out in 1976. The Missing Peace came out in 72. That was number 8. Number 7 was Gentle Giant, their debut album, came out in 1970. Number 6 was Acquiring a Taste, 71, the follow-up from the debut. And number 5 is In a Glass House, which came out in 1973. And number 3 was The Power and the Glory, came out in 74. Number 2, Octopus, 72. And my number 1 is Freehand. This is all subjective. This is my ranking. There's no rights and wrongs. I mean, you can put a comment in saying I'm wrong. I'm absolutely fine with that. But put your own ranking in. Put your own, say, top 10 in, or put, I mean, it's only 11, so do your top 11, and tell me some reasons why. Because ranking, as I say, is subjective. It's how we feel, and how you feel will be different to me. Where you come into Gentle Giant would have been different to me. How you listen to these albums will be different to me. What it means to you, how you feel, the vibe that comes off it is going to be different. And I find it fascinating. I love reading the comments of other people's rankings of the albums that we're talking about. I did one a little while ago about Yes, and people have been putting in, I mean, there's hundreds of comments in there, and people have been putting in their ranking, even if it's the top 10, because there was 21 Yes albums. But even if it was the top 10, it's just really fascinating for me to see how you feel about some of these albums. So don't just put a ranking, but tell me a little bit about why you're doing the ranking in that order and how you felt about those albums. That's what makes having a YouTube community so much fun, because you can find out about how other people feel about it. I honestly find that fascinating. So if you do have some time to do that when you watch this video, have a little think about it and put your ranking in of Gentle Giant albums, and maybe a little bit of bit of information about why you feel that way. So hope you've enjoyed that. If you like this sort of stuff, then subscribe to the channel, like, and absolutely put a comment in. I do answer all my comments, or as much as I can. Sometimes they become a little bit overwhelming sometimes, and I've got to sort of really sit down and spend a whole evening doing it, but I do answer as many as I can. So please leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe. And if you want to share this as well, please do so. So hope you enjoyed that. Until next time, I'll see you later.